Is it in the mail?
It is. It is. Keep waiting. You know, it is slower these days here in the United States. But okay, so this is US Rugby Happy Hour Live. Thank you all for coming in. We have a big guest coming in just a couple minutes. Fitzy and I have one or two things to talk about first, but just in a moment we have Mike Friday, USA Rugby Sevens men's head coach, joining us from Cape Town. But Fitzy, real quick before we get to him, there's some big news today we got to discuss really quick, and this is not good. You know what I'm alluding to?
Yeah, I know exactly what you're alluding to, Bill.
Rugby New York apparently is out MLR, and that's right after Toronto jumping out as well. What's your take, man?
Yeah, I think coming on the heels of Toronto dropping out, so two teams in less than 10 days leaving MLR, definitely a little alarming for sure. It does sound like the LA franchise will be coming into 2024, so that's some good news there. But definitely a double whammy of bad news for MLR fans. But optimistic. It sounds like the MLR season is still going to happen in 2024. So we'll see.
Yeah, I'm sure the people at MLR are just pivoting right now with scheduling everything this next season. But
can you hear me now?
We can't kind of hear you now, there, Mike. We were just discussing a little MLR action with Rugby New York jumping off. I think Mike's going to reconnect on us right now. But, one thing I noticed, I know New York didn't really have a big, fan base as far as home games go, and they were switching field to field. And one of our guests a while ago, Fitzy, mentioned that New York isn't really a sports town. It's an entertainment town. So maybe New York City just isn't ready for it.
Yeah, maybe not. A lot of options there. It's a shame that a city's so big with a lot of rugby fans. You'd think they'd be able to draw more of a crowd, but certainly some challenges there in that market. And maybe now's not the right time. And let's rally around the clubs that are showing some strength. But
yeah.
All
right, let's do this. Let's not talk about it anymore. Since we have him, hopefully he sounds good. Checking in from Cape Town is USA Men's Sevens head coach Mike Friday. Mike, can you hear us okay?
I can hear you. Can you hear me? I've managed to get on a Wi-Fi. Hopefully that's made it better.
Yeah.
It is better so far. It is.
Okay. Small mercies. Small mercies.
Yes, one thing. That's right. It'll stick the wins. I got to tell you, Mike, looking at some stuff online, some photos, whatever else, you have the best headwear in the game. Do you travel with like a second suitcase just for hats?
No, I do love a hat. I do love a good one. And the hat that I've got with me is the one from 4th of July training camp. But with all due respect, it is 100% functional. My skin is fair. Yep. I burn easy. And a big brim is required. So we might as well live the life as we should and be loud and proud of the American flag. So I thought, why not? Let's go for it.
Yeah, why not? I wear those same type hats when I'm in the garden, but maybe I'll bring it to a match because I am very fair skin as well. So, all right, Mike, let's get right into it. Why we're here to talk to you, we're here to talk to you about Dubai and Cape Town and other stuff. So let's start with Dubai. Obviously, won the pool, but day 2 wasn't what you wanted. Let's just talk what went wrong, and what are the positives you can take away from the weekend?
Yeah, I mean, we've made no kind of, we haven't hidden the fact that we've got a very distinct strategy for this season. And off the back of what happened in the summer and the fact that our Olympic repechage for some reason was put in the middle of August rather than at June or July or September, October, so the boys could have had proper rest. It meant that we had to go all the way through. And for our senior boys, Kayvon, Perry, Stevie and Joe, that meant they'd been going solid since Tokyo 2021. So for nigh on 2.5, 3 years without a proper break. So once we finished that Olympic qualification and achieved that mission, I told those boys, you are not to be seen around here for 8 or 9 weeks. You need to physically and mentally recharge. Unfortunately, the World Series waits for no one. So we had to make a tactical decision and a strategy that the big party is the Olympics. The World Series has been revamped, as we know. So as a consequence, let's provide opportunity for the young men who had some tough lessons last year on the world circuit to see where we're at and how we're building and moving forward. And we saw some real positive signs on day 1. You know, it didn't all
Right.
go our own way, but our attacking game, our continuity, some of our strike work was really good. Our defensive effort and endeavour to keep teams out, and as well as create turnover opportunities was first class. And you know, we were pretty unlucky not to actually get a clean sweep and do a job on Fiji in game one. We had opportunities, we just made little silly errors. But that's the nature of sevens, right? It's cutthroat, it's brutal, even more so now in the men's game when it's a 12-team tournament. Come day two, it's a new competition, right? You've got a ticket to the big dance, but you've got to step up. And what you saw was we started really well, and we should have scored in the corner. It got chalked off, rightly so, for being foot and touch. But then what you saw is the fragility or the learning curve that the younger players are still on, is that we made a couple of mistakes and New Zealand score, and then we compounded it at the next two kickoffs and we were 21-0 down. And that resilience, that robustness that you only get from being the man in the arena was there to see. And we were found a little bit wanting, if I'm honest. And, you know, that's just, they're not rookie mistakes. It's just the cutthroat environment of the sevens if you don't quite get things right. And that was what was frustrating, because we were in pole position, even if we didn't win that quarterfinal, to still be in that 5th and 6th placing, which gives you more points. But such was the nature of, we just conceded and we continued to concede. It meant we then slipped into the 7th and 8th, which was the most disappointing piece for me. We all have to accept winning and losing. It's the nature of how we stay in the arm wrestle that's the important learning curve from last weekend for us. And whilst they are young men and they are finding their way and they are gaining experiences, the reality is you can only be that for so long as a group. And you know, had we had more of the senior boys in play, maybe we'd have been able to recover from that 7-14-0 deficit. But we don't, and the boys have got to learn the harsh lessons. But we have to, like we said, we still have to hunt the positives. And the positives, there was a lot of positive work in the behaviours and the effort and the endeavour that went about on day one, as well as some of the actual fluidity in the way that we played the game. The Australia game, we had two yellow cards, right? Both of them suspicious. I mean, the Lucas Lecamp so-called tip tackle, you know, being candid. Yeah. If a player lifts one leg and he decides to jump in the air and land on his own shoulder, I think that's on the tackled player. That's gamesmanship, and they got one. And Malachi's was deemed to be a deliberate knock-on. Whether it actually went forward or not, it doesn't matter. That's what the referee decided. But again, what I felt was philosophically wrong with the game is, from the advantage, they scored the 7 points. So that's the 7 points. Why are you then penalising us again with a yellow card? If you want to send our man to the bin for a deliberate knock-on, throw it there and then. Don't play advantage and send him to the bin. But you can't have your cake and eat it. So philosophically, there's a few things that are in discussion there. That won't change for this weekend, but we want 7-on-7 in the game as much as we can. So, you know, that's a game that got away from us, and we should have and we could have won, if I'm honest with you. But I was more disappointed with the 14 minutes against New Zealand, because I wanted to see a little bit more from us, and the boys wanted to see a little bit more from them as well. So, you know, it's tough, right? But you've got to dust yourself down and you've got to go again, because, again, we've got another kind of cutthroat group this week with the host South Africa, Ireland, and GB. I mean, every game's like a quarter-final. I mean, it's fantastic for the supporters. It's not so good for the coaches' hearts. But, you know, there's been some great innovations. That losing bonus point for getting within 7, I think, is adding spice to the whole affair. And ultimately, the name of the game is to get in the top 8 to be in the World Series finals in Madrid. So it's about accumulating points. We want to win tournaments, we want to win rugby games, but we also tactically want to get ourselves in a position to be in Madrid vying for the World Series, as well as a fully fit team firing on all cylinders come the start of January, as we build up towards the Olympics in the summer.
Yeah, Mike, and as you look, you know, you talked about the cutthroat nature of sevens, and, you know, the challenges you had, right, in veteran players needing some rest because of the gauntlet that they faced over the summer. But did you almost, maybe in a counterintuitive way, did you almost welcome the fact that the younger players had to maybe be tested so early, thinking long term, thinking ahead?
100%. Yeah, I mean 100%. I mean, you know, again, I'm very defensive and almost fatherly about all the young players in terms of, we need to give them time. We need to allow them to make mistakes. They've got to get it wrong to get it right. And that was a lot of last year's narrative, right? Where, towards the end of the season, confidence, but they were struggling. It wasn't going our way. And the younger guys were still trying to find their way. So with the summer that we had and the pre-season, this is exactly as you said. It's a wonderful opportunity for them to lay a marker down and put the senior boys under pressure.
Yeah.
And it also means that they have got to step up and realise that they can't rely on those guys in order to progress and develop themselves. So yeah, from a kind of holistic standpoint, it is great news. I think ultimately, though, like anything, we all want to win and we all want to make sure that we're moving in the right direction. But strategically and tactically with the playing group, we took a very clear direction that our pre-season is all the way through to the end of December. So when we come back from tour, the boys will have a heavy conditioning block in order that when we come back together on January the 1st, that is when we are really, really building the foundations and driving forward in the World Series, when everybody will be available. Everybody should be in a very good physical place, and we can wait for nobody. And it is up to each individual to maximise their opportunities and their potential. So, it is a bit of a gamble. It is a little bit of a tactical strategy. But as you said, it's also a fantastic opportunity for the men coming and the younger men to step up and see where they sit.
So what I'm hearing is the guys can't eat too many Christmas cookies late in December. Then.
I mean, with all due respect, Christmas is cancelled. So Christmas. The reality is they are going home.
Good.
Yeah.
Out to remote condition and remote train, but they have got very strict programs they need to hit, because ultimately on January the 2nd, I mean, I've been quite nice. I've given them January the 1st off, but January the 2nd is fitness testing day, and you are expected to be in and around and on the point of the scores that we want. Because if you've done your programming over Christmas, you will be there. If you haven't, you won't, and there will be consequences. So, we can't allow any sort of our physical preparation or getting that piece wrong to get in the way of the mission, which is for us to be peaking and competing for the silverware in Madrid and also at the Olympics.
Mike, I want to talk more about the players individually here in a moment, but looking forward to Cape Town this weekend. Same group, no one's joining?
Hello?
Hey, Mike? Fit to go.
Yeah, Mike, I don't know if you heard Bill's question there.
No, I didn't. Please say again.
Yeah, we had this problem last week where Bill was asking questions and the guest couldn't hear. But until we'll figure that out in a second. But Bill's question was same group from last year in Dubai. So any new names joining for Cape Town? Oh, Mike, can you hear me? Bill, I think we're having some issues.
Yeah. Hey, Mike, if you can hear us, okay, just drop out there for a second and we'll get you back up. Hopefully that will help out. Like we said earlier, guys, this is the nature of these Twitter spaces. Hopefully others can hear me, but and then we'll get Mike back up here now and see if he can hear us as well. This is why we need a producer.
Hello?
Hey, Mike?
Sorry about that. I think what they've just had here in Cape Town is when they turn the electricity off for a little while. so I went out in darkness for a little while, but that is the norm in Cape Town at around 8:00.
So, Mike, you can hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Oh,
yes.
okay. Phew.
So, what was your question?
So we were talking about the Dubai roster. Is it the same going into Cape Town, or are you adding anybody?
It is the same roster. Obviously, Peter V picked up an injury and an HIA, which rules him out of this tournament. So he's gone home. But basically, we took 14 to Dubai, and we've now travelled on with 13. It is interesting because Steve Thomason and Joe Schroeder are over in Cape Town, but they are over here working with. We're not working with. They're actually with the Golden Eagles, our philanthropy arm, who are huge supporters of us. So whilst they're doing their remote conditioning and their training, they're also experiencing with the Golden Eagles. And I do believe tomorrow is a fortuitous day for them as they go on a wine safari. So, it's a bit. The Golden Eagles and the philanthropy part of our program is a huge part, and they're a big part of our family, which enables us to actually operate as a program. So,
100%.
there will be no changes. It will be the 13, will be the 12 that finished the tournament plus Jack Wendling.
Yeah, you had me on wine safari.
Yeah.
My mind went somewhere else.
Yeah.
All right, Mike, let's talk about youngest. Oren Beiser made his debut this past weekend. Talk about his performance and what you saw in him in camp resulting in you adding him to the roster.
Yeah, I mean, Oren's been on our radar. I mean, we've been on our development radar now probably 2 or 3 years, played the under-23s, has excelled in camp, obviously had a few injury issues, a shoulder reconstruction. So we've had to have limited time to him whilst he also finished his studies, because for me, finishing your studies is everything. Rugby does not interrupt with you getting your qualifications and getting your education in place. So we've had to balance that. And he came into camp in the summer, and he's a very intelligent player. He's almost... I don't want to put pressure on Oren, but he's another young Ben Pinkelman. He's a clever player. He has still got some physical development to go in terms of building his kind of speed endurance engine, his repeated effort engine to compete and be the man that he can be on the World Series. But he's kind of 4 or 5 months into that development, and it's going to take another 5 or 6 months for us to probably see the full benefits of that. So you saw real smart rugby play by Oren last weekend, mixed in with some rookie errors and some rookie mistakes. And unfortunately, as we know, those rookie mistakes sometimes cost you dearly. But he's got good speed for a big man. So he's probably a lot quicker than Pinky. Pinky won't mind me saying that. But he also has the rugby EQ to become a smart player, the way that Pinky is exceptionally high in rugby EQ, the way he operates around the breakdown, how he controls the contact areas. Oren has that potential, as well as that athletic ability. And I think the big thing that Oren needs to come to terms with is he has to accept that he is good enough to be here, and he deserves to be here. He's a humble guy, but also, again, confidence of a young man when you get put into these tough environments, can sometimes take a little time for them to flourish. So we've got to continue to support him and also accept and realise, whilst minimising those kind of scars of learning, that it is going to be part of his journey, and that he's able to cope and be resilient and become more robust at dealing with that and moving forward. But yeah, he's a fabulous rugby player, and he's got a big future in rugby. He's challenging for the Sevens now, but he's a young man. You can go in different directions, and your journey can go in different ways over the years, and I think he's going to be one of the fortunate ones who can decide that for himself. And
he has slightly more hair than Pinky, so that's a thing. Yeah. Not as much in the chin, which I saw an angle of that.
Exactly. Well, I don't know. I'm not sure Oren's capable of having a pinky beard.
Not yet.
But,
too young.
Yeah.
So you mentioned, I've heard the term confidence. Obviously, any coach would want that, but I've heard that a lot over the past weekend. So for Oren, obviously having a high level of confidence playing is important. But so how does someone new like him, without this level of experience, come into these games with the level of confidence needed, without being arrogant?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough, right? It's a brutal environment, and you've got to learn on the job. And I think having the support of people like Pinky and Lance around him, and then you've got the younger guys that have been here for a year or two, AC, and Adam, and then obviously Ben Brazil, who came in as a very young man as well. But he's had to deal with some of his injury issues. I think he can lean on that, and those guys can help support him and give him the assurances that whilst we want to minimise mistakes. Mistakes are part of the game, and it's how we react to those mistakes. It's how we stay on task when those types of mishaps happen. And but that's true to say for a number of the youngsters. We forget. Well, Lucas Lecamp is very young, even though he's been with us kind of for a good 12 months, and has kind of almost blown up the circuit at times, but can be prone to making some errors that are costly. You know, that's just, unfortunately, it's just part of the learning curve, and it's something that we have to work with and try and ensure that we can manage and still get the results we need. And that becomes easier with some more senior blood to rely on, and also, being blunt, more senior blood, which makes it far more competitive. And competition is important as well, and being able to cope with the stresses and the strains of that. And I think Oren will get, he's the type of personality that the more comfortable he becomes, the more relaxed he is, the better he will make good decisions. And he hides behind a little bit of bravado of being the funny man and the talker. And that's a big part of his personality is too, but it's then just realising and recognising what is required at that moment.
So, Mike, from my next question here, I've got to ask this first. Is it acceptable to call Ben Pinky? Because he's a big guy. So if I went up to him and said, "Hey, Pinky," I just want to make sure that, I'm not.
Pink. I mean, at the end of the day, Pinky is Pinky, right? Because we've got Benny B as well. Mm-hmm. So I think the only person that calls Pinky Ben is probably Ben's mum. And probably when Ben's in trouble, and it'll either be Ben or Benjamin. I mean, I think probably if I'm having a robust conversation with Pinky, I'd probably call him Ben.
Yep.
A bit like when somebody calls my name Michael, and I turn around thinking only my mum calls me that. There's obviously a problem. So I think Pinky's a term of affection. Yeah, I mean,
fair. So it must have been a welcome return of Ben, and also Madison Hughes. I mean, past winners, right? Inspiring stuff from both players. In particular, Pinky to come back from a serious back injury, but for both of those players, they're playing their way back into the rotation for the Olympics, right? So, meaning, or rephrased, no spot is guaranteed set yet for Paris.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, let's look at them individually. So with Pinky, Pinky has been part of our coaching team for the last 2 years. He's been a big part of what we've been trying to do to reignite our pathways. Our pathways, for 5 or 6, 7 years, we've been working tirelessly in the background on our pathways so we can provide opportunities, transparency and clarity for young players on their journey to try and find their way to get to residency and compete. But with COVID, that got turned off. And just at a time where we needed to have athletes being around that, what you would call the golden squad that came through with me in the first 4 or 5 years, these young players didn't have the benefit of that exposure. Then they all left and retired, and then these boys just had to come in and start again. So Pinky obviously couldn't play, so we saw his potential as a communicator. His technical and tactical appreciation of the game is very, very high, and his ability to communicate that effectively to bring the best out of young players was clear to see. So we nurtured and developed Pinky to become a key coach. In the background, he had he still had this urge that he could play again, and we have always said to him, look, if you can, then go for it. If you can't, then you need to be looking at other things, and you could be a very capable coach. So they ended up running parallel. But actually, being a coach is actually enabling him to be a smarter player now, as he's come back out of the coaching trailer and gone into the locker room. The problem is now he also understands he can have a 360 view, whereas before he was probably the biggest trade union man for the players. When it came to discussing things with the trailer, he now has a balanced understanding of what we're trying to achieve and where we're trying to get to, and how we actually do individualise and nurture and develop and treat players in an individual basis. And you're seeing that translate now on the pitch to him. So the biggest hurdle for Pinky, like you say, is he needs to regain his fitness. He needs to be able to ensure he's resilient and robust enough to stay the course of this ruthless game in order to give him the best opportunity to compete. Because from a rugby EQ perspective, he is excellent. So his is more a physical piece. Now, very different to Madison, who, was my captain, 21 years old, thrust in, developed, actually grew and led that experienced squad fantastically through to Tokyo, where it just kind of didn't happen for a number of reasons, and then stepped away from the game to pursue other things and do what Maddison does, which is plan for the future and appreciate and understand and try and develop himself as a person. But he had this, again, both of them very young, still this, Maddison just 30, 31 and Pinky 29, 30. They still had this irk that, can I compete? Can I cut it? And rather than be the young man, I'll be the slightly older guy. And he has worked very hard behind closed doors, away from residency programs, to get himself into a physical shape, because I challenged him. I said, it's insanely hard to come back into this environment if you've been out of it for 2 or 3 years. Physically, it's a hungry man's game. It's a desperate man's game. It's not a guy that, who's been there, seen there, done it, and then thinks he can do it again, but can he really, really go for it? And fair play to Maddie. He has attacked last summer away from the programme fantastically well to arrive in September to compete. Is he rusty? Absolutely. Is he at his best yet? No. Do we expect him to be at his best? No. Are we, as you said, nurturing him back into the rotation to compete? Yes, we are. And you saw glimpses just in Dubai, just his try, his running support line of that's the old Maddie that we knew, who would always pick up those lines up the middle of the pitch. What you're also seeing is there's a real continuity and togetherness and connectivity in our D, because when Maddie was at the height of his powers, he was always the top tackler for the USA and always in the top 3 for the World Series, because he got through a lot of defensive connection work and making his tackles. He's still probably got 20, 25, 30% more to go, but he again has got a big fitness block coming up ahead of him. He will still have, not confidence issues are the wrong thing, but it will still be an alien environment for him, because he's been out of it for 2.5 years. So he will be feeling his way in, understanding where he fits in the squad, and getting comfortable. And he is more comfortable just being one of the players rather than the man that they turn to. He is a natural leader, so he will naturally provide that input, but he's also that good a leader. He's more than happy to be part of a group, not necessarily the man with the armband, and still contribute positively to ensure that the younger players feel heard and the younger players feel valued, as well as work and guide and assist and offer a view to the senior boys. And, we're very fortunate with the way that Kayvon, grew into the captaincy role when Maddison moved on, but also the way that he has embraced and taken it to a new level with this group. And the two of them are seamless in terms of how they go about their business, alongside the other personalities in the senior group, the likes of Perry and Stevie and Joe.
Well, speaking of the senior group, or the more senior group, the ones that aren't around, any chance we may see another name or two come back into the mix, or is this pretty much it? Maybe a Danny or a Falau, or
no, you won't. No, you won't see a Danny. I mean, Danny, you won't see a Danny. I think Danny is done with playing, and certainly he would love the idea, but I think the fitness test alone would put Danny off.
Me
I
too.
mean, I don't think we'll see the likes of many more of those senior guys. I mean, who knows? Right? I doubt it, if I'm honest with you.
Yeah.
I think, and the reason I say that is that it's an all-in thing, and you've got to be all in, and you've got to be prepared to sacrifice and move to San Diego and fully ingrain yourself and buy into the program. Now, a lot of those boys you've just talked have other lives. They have families. They have. Their families have jobs elsewhere in the company, which would make it logistically difficult for them to do that unless they decided that that's what they wanted to do as a family. And that's a huge choice and a huge kind of decision to make, because let's be perfectly honest, they will have other priorities, be that financial, whatever, which they would have to probably kind of consider.
Right.
If they wanted to go at it. So I would probably say no, I wouldn't expect any more. And I think ultimately as well, with respect to this group, they need to step up and grasp it and take it. And they need to get after it. And the beauty about this group, there are a large number of them that will be able to compete and push through for the home Olympics in 2028. And that's part of this whole pathway piece that we've been building with the Golden Eagles over the last 18 months, 2 years, is that you saw the first signs of that in Rugby Town under 23s with the way that they went about their business. We've then started to do that with the under 18s, and they'll go off to the world schools. And it's about creating opportunities along the way to build the conveyor belt, to allow the one or twos to push on through, as well as the group that are very much kind of here in the now that can take us to 2028. Again, look at the Pan Am group.
Yeah.
You've got people like Nick Hardrick who graduate at the end of next year. Again, so you can start to see the bits of the jigsaw and the continuity piece being put in place. And that was the big thing that hurt us after 2021 because of COVID. Our whole pipeline was turned off and we had to start from scratch. But the problem is the rest of the world expected us to still be the same team when we were at the height of our strengths in 2019, rather than realise that you've got to allow young players times to flourish and develop. We're not New Zealand. We can't reinvent ourselves every 6 months because they've got a player pathway that's 50 deep. We sadly don't have that luxury. Do we aspire to do that? I mean, it'd be lovely if we could have that, but that's probably a whole different podcast. So, how do we build a proper pathway that is fit for purpose for USA Rugby to enable us to move forward, not just in the sevens, but in the 15s? I mean, ultimately that takes a lot of money and a lot of collaboration and a lot of compromise. Now, again, that's the grail.
Well, when you talk about the building a program, I mean, could PR7s be that? I know right now it's just fledgling competition, but could that be?
I think the PR7s is a wonderful piece of the jigsaw that bridges college, club, and international. I genuinely do. Where I struggle is the connectivity, because club sevens are not allowing PR7s players to play for their clubs, even if they've been with their clubs for years. You can only have, and if you play in the PR7s, you're deemed professional, when really you're given a travel stipend to cover your costs to get there. But that, in theory, means you've signed a professional contract. So we're not joined up, or we're not coordinated to ensure that we're giving the best opportunity for these players to have a clear pathway through. Likewise, obviously, you've got college restrictions or considerations to play in PR7s that make it difficult for some players to do that as well, rather than finding ways to ensure that the college game and the club game and the PR7s game, let's just call it that whole pathway is coordinated and you are able to clearly move through without consequences. Because ultimately, what do we want at the national team? We want to provide as many playing opportunities as we can to allow these players to showcase themselves, to have an opportunity to get invited to a camp or earn the right to get invited to the camp. What you don't want is, my mate from down the road recommended him, therefore he gets in because of that. We don't want that. We want talent identification. We want clear pathways. We want clear competition and coordinated and joined up competitions from the different pieces of the jigsaw, right? And you've got the club game, you've got the PR7s game, and you've got the college game. But they all seem to be on their own agenda, driving their own narrative, rather than what's the end game here? The end game here is to make USA Sevens one of the best sevens teams in the world, because if we do that, that shines a light on our sport in a country where, let's be perfectly blunt, winning is everything in the American sporting landscape. Coming second isn't really an option, right? So in order to give us the best chance to do that, we need to be coordinated in everything we do. And that's a frustrating piece for me, because I've seen some things that have gone on that have stopped that from happening, like the restrictions on the club sevens, and just not finding smart ways to allow the college players to be involved in PR7s. So hopefully we can sort that out. Yeah, work in progress. Move in the right direction, and we can continue to try and kick on, because the biggest challenge for USA is such a big place.
Yeah,
it's huge, right? Which makes the travel, the costs, and the logistics of allowing these teams to play and participate and compete actually quite challenging.
Mike, I want to switch gears here for a second. You've seen the reports, right? Antoine Dupont, Michael Hooper, just to name a few big name teen stars linking up for their shot at gold. How do you feel about this? Good for the Sevens game?
Well, I think it's interesting, right? I've seen this before, right? And as I said to you, to be successful in the Sevens series, you've got to be a hungry man. You know, if you've eaten at the rich man's table and you try and come back to the poor man's table of the Sevens, and you're not prepared to fight and go to the dark places, then you'll struggle. Ultimately, you will fail. And we've seen some top players have a go and top players fail. The interesting ones for me are, I'm interested in Michael Hooper because what's his driver for doing it? You know, is it because he really wants to be in the Olympics, or is it because, well, let's just see, I should be able to do this because I'm a 100-odd cap player for Australia. So I'm interested with him. I think Dupont is built differently. This bloke is built differently. And I think he will be exceptional because, again, it's in France, but the man has no ego. He just wants to go out and compete. And I think he'll be an interesting... I don't think they'll play him at halfback. I think they'll play him at first receiver or centre. The one that is really, really exciting me from a Sevens perspective is Damien Penaud.
Yeah.
If he comes... I mean, as an aerial forward with his attacking ability and the way he operates in the air and his work ethic off the ball, both sides of the ball, he is one of the... He could be like the ultimate Sevens player if it had come through the Sevens the other way. So I think Penaud, if he does come, could be just box office. I think Dupont will be box office too. My jury is out on Hooper. I think in terms of shining the light on our game, we've got two of the biggest world stars of rugby, forget which code, of rugby, playing the Olympics in their home country. It makes France very dangerous if they fully buy into it and come on board January, February time, which is what we're hearing will happen. I think whether or not Dupont and Penaud will be in LA and Vancouver or coming at Hong Kong, I think it's around that time, and that will give them enough time to understand and bed in. Because obviously their rugby EQ is fantastic, but can they make the adjustments physically? And probably it's a 6 to 9 week adjustment in terms of that repeated effort and durability you need to be a Sevens player over a 15s player. And then, can you go to the dark places? And I think those two are more than happy to go to the dark places whenever and wherever.
Mike, one last question for you. Your third Olympic Games, correct, coming up? Yeah. So when people ask, say, other athletes, say Tom Brady in the Super Bowl, say whoever in FIFA World Cups, they treat each one differently. And what I say is, like, they don't take it for granted maybe 1 year or whatever else. So are you approaching Paris any differently? Is it maybe on the personal level?
I am 100% approaching this differently. I mean, I think what I learned from the lead up to Tokyo, and more importantly, what I learned from what happened post-COVID, in terms of how we went from being a squad which was recognised as one of the best in the world, and ultimately that Olympics probably a year too late for us as a result. But we also had to deal, and we didn't deal particularly well as a squad with being apart and then coming together and then having to make those adjustments as well as we probably wanted to. And that kind of left us in a place where we had some regrets after Tokyo. So my whole mantra in this lead up to getting Olympic qualification and this whole lead up towards January the 2nd and then our final push to the Olympics is I'm leaving nothing unturned, and I will assume nothing and will continually drive and ask the questions to ensure that the players are doing everything they can do to be the best version of themselves, not assume that they will. So if that means I have to be on your back the whole time, if it means that I have to support you the whole time, I have got that commitment in my head that I won't have any but if scenarios. And if that means I've got to have hard conversations with the union, I've got to have hard conversations with USOPC, I've got to have robust conversations and fall out with, in theory, my bosses, then so be it, because I would rather die trying than have a but if, or if I'd have just done that, or if I'd done this. The cause has to be the main focus. And you know, sometimes you do need to break some eggs to kind of get there. And that's my whole mantra, because I want this team to go and be the best version of themselves and represent the country in the way that this country wants to be represented. And we have a unique opportunity again to do that. So let's make the most of that opportunity and seize it, which requires doing the right things now, not just 4 weeks before.
Yeah. Maybe talking about getting tough. I noticed your son, Lucas, like father, like son, plays scrum half. He was out in the mix out in California early this year. Did you get on him a bit? Yeah. And how do you do with the grown-ups?
Well, I mean, that was the point. It was a bit of a wake-up call for the grown-ups.
Oh.
Because Lucas has just turned 17. And Lucas was capped for England a year young at 18s.
Wow.
And was there training to get ready to go on a South African tour for 18s. And what they realised when they saw Lucas is, because Lucas is ridiculously driven to compete. So he's got a little bit of me in him. But obviously, he's a far better rugby player than I ever was. And what they saw is that the way that he approaches his skill execution, his decision making, was a surprise for them, because they're thinking, wow, he's a 16-year-old, but he doesn't drop balls. He makes good decisions. He reads, and they were taken back a little bit. Where he got the most benefit from being with them was, obviously at 16, 17, he's still waiting for his last kind of speed spurt. So him being able to compete with them with the speeds they run out was a real physical challenge for him. But it meant that when he went back, the game felt a lot slower for him. So it's an interesting one, right? Because I think the lessons that they learn is that, wow, if he could have the rugby EQ he has, then there's no excuse for us not kind of pushing the boundaries and pushing on, because that is one of the biggest challenges for American rugby athletes, because they come to the sport later. They don't have the exposure that, you know, some of the rugby mature nations like Lucas would have in England. So they have got to play catch up on that. But where they have an advantage is that, you know, American athletes are always regarded as physical specimens, and our boys are certainly that. So that was Lucas's learning as well, was that, okay, well, from a physical standpoint, I can get more out of myself. So it was a bit of a trade-off, but he loved it. I mean, you know, my eldest son has been out before and he's loved it. You know, who wouldn't, being paid to play rugby?
All right, Mike. Fitz, you want to add anything?
No, that was great, Mike. I'm glad the Wi-Fi held up for you.
Yeah, me too. And the lights are most of it.
I think that was more, I think it was night call. It was nighttime call, maybe with the flights flashing on them. Go to bed. All right, Mike, listen, again, thank you so much for making this work. Good luck this weekend in Cape Town.
Thank you very much, lads. Go well.
All right, cheers.
Bye-bye.
All right, guys, this is the middle of the day. Fitzy, I don't think we really have a lot of time to recap, right? There was a lot of good information. I got to tell you, you all just need to go back and listen to the show. It will be a podcast tomorrow or later today if I get my act together. But it'll be fine-tuned, polished, and put up on the interwebs for you to listen to on your favorite podcast player. Fitzy, any last comment?
No, I'm excited for... It's great to get that inside stuff on kind of the direction of what we're aiming for, looking ahead to Paris this summer. So I'm fired up.
Oh, me too. And I'd love to get out to Paris again, but we'll see how that goes. All right, Fitzy, that's a good one. We will chat again later. Everybody else, thank you so much for listening in. If you were live streaming on Facebook and YouTube, thank you so much for tuning in. Everybody else, have a great night, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.